At some more scripture this morning, and I'm just great to be back. And I'm hoping that you're excited about what we're going to be talking about today. And the topic is going to be John chapter 6, verses 21, excuse me, verses 16 through 21. And so that's John chapter 6, verses 16 through 21. It's about the walking on the water. We're going to get going. So let me go ahead and read the passage. It says, when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the Sea of Capernaum. Darkness had already set in, but Yeshua, Jesus, had not yet come to them. Then a high wind arose, and the sea began to churn. After they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea. He was coming near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him on board. At once, the boat was at the shore where they were heading. So immediately it was at the shore. So let's get started, and let's maybe fill in a little bit about what's going on. Uh, Yeshua comes to disciples actually walking on the water, and that's what we were just talking about. We find the same account in Matthew chapter 14, 22 through 33, and also Mark chapter 6, verses 45 through 51. So first, let's actually take a look at kind of the location of the area, okay, and maybe just kind of describe a little bit about what may have been going or what was going on. The Sea of Galilee is about 600 to 680 feet below sea level, and there is a cup-like depression among the hills of the area. When the sun sets, the air cools, and as the cooler air from the west rushes down over the hillside, the result is that the wind turns the lake. The wind at lake level is warm and moist. So as the cooler area coming from the mountain uh, meets with the warmer air coming from the lake, and lower level produces wind. So the Sea of Galilee is fairly shallow. It's only about 200 feet at its deepest point in the middle, which means its shallower body of water are more easily stirred up, and during these greater storms that they get, these wind storms that they get. You know, here in Oregon, we actually have some of the high lakes that actually have a afternoon wind on every one of them, and every afternoon, everybody really comes off of the lake fishing because it's just too rough, and you're fighting the wind the whole time. And in the evening, it dies down again. So you have this morning and kind of evening fishing time when the lake's pretty good. So kind of know exactly what is being talked about. The Sea of Galilee is fairly shallow, so it's at 200 feet deep. According to Mark chapter 6, verse 45, they were headed for Bethsaida, which isn't even across the whole lake. We see we see, if you look at a map, it's only about halfway on the narrow part of the lake. Matthew chapter 14 verse 24 says, at evening time the boat was over a mile um, from land, battered by the wind. It says that the wind was against them, and the Greek word is was opposite to them, so it was in their face. Okay, so the wind was coming down through the cupped area of the mountains, facing them and pushing them to toward the middle, if you will. So they were trying to get to land, and they're rowing, and you know how that could be is while you're rowing and the wind's trying to push you another direction. Now remember, they left Jesus at evening, and it was during evening In fact, it says it was dark. It was during the evening when the wind actually came up and was pushing them around on the lake. Now, if you look at Matthew chapter 14, verse 25, it wasn't until the fourth watch, or about 3 in the morning, that Jesus came to them walking on the water. And I say this because the disciples, excuse me, had been in the boat from evening, until about 3 in the morning, rowing and trying to get to the shore at Bethsaida. Think about this. How tired do you think they were rowing and fighting against the wind for hours? I remember a fishing trip that I went on, and myself and another pastor went to Diamond Lake and to fish for just a few days. One of the best places to catch fish. They got huge trout in there, or they did. It's opposite from the marina on the other side of the lake, uh, which is where we headed for the day. As we rented a boat there. Diamond Lake is similar to the Sea of Galilee in that it is getting evening and wind is coming up, and I guess where the wind comes from, yes, it's the marina, which is directly opposite of where we were. Okay, so we were trying to get back. Now, understand, we weren't rowing; we had motors, and but we were trying to get back to the marina, and and as we were trying to get back there, um, the wind was against us. It was head on, and I can remember that it was hard to control the boat because every time you'd get on course, it would kind of shove you off a little bit, and you'd have to readjust things, readjust the motor to stay on track. And we were having a great day when this happened. Now, unlike the disciples, we had a small motor on this boat, and we were not rowing, but it's still difficult, if you will, to even with the motor. As I started the journey back, the wind was to our face, and the waves on the lake were whitecaps, so big that they were almost even with the sides of the boat. And the boat, because of the wind uh, coming right at us, was hard to keep into the waves, and so the wind would push the boat to one side or the other. And I had to admit that I was anxious. Okay, I was kind of anxious about it, and my pastor friend was really anxious. Uh, so much so that he was kind of gripping both sides of the boat, and his hands were white from gripping the boat so hard. And the distance that we had to travel was about a mile, or a mile and a half, somewhere in there, which at that time seemed like a great distance. Okay, when you're fighting the waves and so forth, just to get back. What got me though is my friend was so scared that I was laughing, and it took the edge off for me anyway. At one point, he turned around and yelled, "If we sink, should I grab the fish?" and, at which time I almost lost it. Okay, but it seemed all the time that I wasn't going to be able to get us safely to the marina. So even though these guys were working hard, much harder than I was, I do understand a little about the event. Okay, but it didn't stop there. At this time, Yeshua, Jesus, came walking on the water on top of the waves, and they think he was a ghost. According to Matthew, they think he was a ghost or a spirit. And the reason for that is the mariners back at that time, those that spent time, is that you'll see a ghost just before you're going to die. And so they were thinking they were going to die and that he was a ghost. So when they had this thought, according to the Pharisees, a man was not uh, was not to salute a friend at night, because you have to be careful that you're maybe saluting a demon at night. Um, and that comes from some of their writings with Sanhedrin. And if you look at Job chapter 9, verse 1 through 8, 8 says that that God is the one who stretches out the heavens and who walks in the waves of the sea. If you look at Exodus chapter 6, verses 2 and 9, Yahweh God identifies himself to the people, and then in verse 5 tells them that he has heard their cries, and Yahweh tells them, God tells them that he is going to deliver them. But if you look at verse 9, they did not listen. And the reason was their broken spirit, hard labor. A broken spirit in the Hebrew means impatience, or they were impatient in their spirit, and they were in hard labor at the same time. It's easy to allow circumstances in our lives to make us impatient, which dulls our hearing really, and it's easy to allow the hard circumstances to take our vision off of the one who has come to set us free. And that's actually may have been where they were at that point. Now remember, they had just witnessed seeing him feed uh, the crowds of 5,000 people of men. Okay, so it's much more than that. Um, he took, but if you look at John chapter 6 verse 20, it says to them, he says to them, "It is I." Could this be the same as in Exodus 3:14 through 15, where Yahweh replied to Moses, "I am who I am"? It is I, okay, Yahweh Yeshua, God Jesus, and I have come to deliver you. What an amazing thing to hear. If you look at Matthew 14, 27 through 33, Yeshua, Jesus, tells them not to be afraid. But look what happens next. The word afraid in the Greek is actually two words that means to frighten or to be in awe of or in a reverence, which is part of worship. And the second word means not or nothing. So you do not reverence this wind or storm. You don't worship it. And that's actually what can happen when we begin to fear it. But in verse 27, Yeshua tells them to have their cheer or their courage. And it's a word that means to build and to exercise courage. Peter says something that I used to think it was stupid, the thing that I have ever, the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He says, if it is you, okay, tells me it, he said, tell me to come to you. Okay. And I thought, Peter, what if it wasn't him? Okay. Now you got to remember this was a number of years ago, and it just struck me as a strange question, strange statement to say, because they were already afraid. They were thinking of this, but at the same time, I gotta believe that Peter heard something that maybe others didn't hear. Okay, and what Peter heard was, I believe he knew the voice of Jesus. I believe that he knew the voice of Yeshua. And really, that's what we need to do, is we need to learn his voice, so that in these times of storm, we recognize the voice when he calls out. The point is that once he recognized that voice, it was easy for him to step out. He stepped out of the boat and walked to him on the waves until he took his eyes off of him. took his eyes off of Yeshua, off of Jesus, and back on the waves. And once again, the storm seemed bigger, and he began to sink. And the point is we need to keep our eyes on him. We need to know his voice, because his voice, knowing his voice in that storm, will calm us. And it'll cause us to have courage, because it's him. It's the one who saves us. It's the one who calms our storms. Now, Yeshua, Jesus, actually caught him, and brought him. They were back at the boat, and things were great from that point. But I think that the point of the scripture is getting to know the one actually that calms our storm. I would like to thank you for coming today. I'd like to thank you for being here. I would ask that please subscribe to the station and our this channel, and also hit the bell so you have notifications, and also give us a thumbs up on the video and give us comments on what you think. And if you have any questions, make sure that we get those. We'd love to dialogue with you. You have a great day. And